Hey, I'm Liz. I spent almost $1,400 buying these 8 budget-friendly backpacking tents. Then I tested them over a period of about 2 months, and in this video, you'll find out everything you need to know about all these tents in these neat charts that I know you guys love. Plus, you'll also find out exactly how much bang for your buck you can get with a $100 tent versus a $200 tent versus even the most expensive $300 tent in this review. Now, let's get straight into the first test, spaciousness. For this test, I looked at 2 main things. First, the total base area, so that includes not just the inner tent, but also the vestibule space as well. And second, the livable space inside each tent. Starting with the first point, the base area, here are all the details that you'll need. I measured the length of each tent and I measured the width as well, and used these measurements to calculate the total base area, and everything you see here is from biggest to smallest. But of course, we also need to look at the outer vestibule area as well. Only the Kelty had 1 vestibule, the rest of them had 2 vestibules, but of course the square footage ranges quite a bit based on how big each vestibule is. Now, when you put both the inner area and the outer area together, you get the total base area, and this ranges from the biggest to smallest again. Now, for the second segment of this test, we're going to look at livable space, and that includes not just the peak height inside the tent, but also the number of vertical walls each tent has. If you look at the Alps Mountaineering links, although it has the highest peak height of all the tents here, it did not feel like the most spacious tent that I have because it has no vertical walls. The Lynx has a very simple 2-pole structure. It's just the 2 main poles crisscrossing over each other to give you the main tent body. If you take a closer look at it, you'll notice that all 4 walls of the tent have like a dome shape. They all have a peak height in the center, and the rest of the tent just like slopes downwards from there. On the other hand, if you look at the North Face Stormbreak 2, even though it's a whopping 4 inches shorter than the Alps Mountaineering Lynx, it was a lot more spacious because it has an insane number of vertical walls, 4 to be more specific. That's because on top of the 2 main tent poles that the Lynx also has, the Stormbreak has an extra 2 short tent poles that go at the very top of the tent. These 2 extra poles pull the tent body up, giving you an extended peak height throughout this entire square area at the top, which feels so much more spacious when you're inside the tent. And from the outside, this is what the extended peak height looks like. Generally, the tents that have no vertical walls have only 2 poles, those with 2 vertical walls have 3 poles, and those with vertical walls on all 4 sides have 4 poles. And with that, based on all these different spaciousness subtests, here's how I rated all these budget backpacking tents for spaciousness. The next test is setting up and packing away each of these tents, and here are the setup timings from the fastest to the slowest. Typically, the more feature-rich a tent is, the longer it'll take to set up. So if you remember what we talked about for the Kelty, this tent has only 2 poles and 1 vestibule, so it takes the shortest amount of time to set up. On the other hand, if you remember the North Face Stormbreak, it has double the number of features, so 4 poles and 2 vestibules, so it takes a little bit longer to set up. But overall, there's only like a 2+ minute difference between the longest and shortest setup timings. Not a super big deal breaker or anything, so feel free to ignore this test if you don't think it's that important. Very quickly, here are the pack away timings. They also tend to follow the same trend. The more feature rich, the longer it'll take to pack away. And with that, here's how I rated all these tents based on their ease of use. The third test is how feature-rich each tent is. Backpacking tents are meant to be functional and lightweight, so you're not going to find a ton of features in them, but here are the ones that we're going to compare now, starting with the doors of each tent. Here's a quick table of info summarizing everything you need to know about the doors of the tents. This is probably the most important feature to look out for, and I ranked the best doors to the worst ones. If you like super big doors, the Nemo Aurora 2 has the best ones of them all. They're at least 20% bigger than the rest of the tents here, which not only makes it easy to get in and out of the tent, but cross ventilation is fantastic as well. If you hate dealing with door toggles, I'd recommend going for pockets instead. They're much more user-friendly. Tying the door fabric up using toggles takes easily 5 to 10 seconds or so, while just stuffing them into the door pockets beside the doors takes 1 to 2 seconds, tops. No more annoying toggles to deal with. Last thing to note here, for a 2-person tent, like all the tents in this review, I'd generally avoid 1-door tents. It's kind of annoying to have to stumble over someone else to get in and out of the tent. As for the other features of the tent, here's another quick table summarizing everything you need to know. The Coleman is probably the only two-person tent I've seen that has windows. It has this like star view window at the back of the tent, and I really liked that I could look out during the day while feeling cooler at the same time. And I could even stargaze at night without having to take the fly off, which I think is the biggest benefit of having something like this. As for storage options, I looked at the number of pockets, loops, and gear lofts that were provided. Overall, I wouldn't say there's a very big difference. The average tent tends to have 2 pockets and around 5 loops. And with that, here's how I rated each backpacking tent for the features they all have. The fourth test is rain protection, and I put all these tents through at least 1 hour of super heavy rain just to see what happened. The gist of the results is that almost every single one of these tents passed this heavy rain test. This is without me adding any additional waterproofing, so we're off to a pretty good start, I think. I was also lucky enough to be able to put some of these tent brands through extra rain tests, and here are my notes. For the North Face and REI, I managed to put some of my other tents through not just 1 hour, but a whopping 24 hours of heavy rain, and these tents survived perfectly fine with no leaks at all. As you get into the second day of rain though, so beyond 24 hours, the North Face's rainfly will start leaking through, and so will the REI's rainfly. So that's about a breaking point for both of these tent brands. Next up, we have the Teton Mountain Ultra. I put it through not just 1 hour of heavy rain, but it even continued to rain lightly to moderately for another 12 hours or so, and not a single drop of water got into the tent. I didn't manage to get the Marmot, Coleman, and Nemo through extra rain, so we'll leave it at this for now, but at least they're better than the last 2 tents. For the Kelty late start, I noticed that the rainfly was damp after 2 hours of heavy rain, although there weren't any drips into the tent or anything. And as for the Alps Mountaineering Links, I noticed that the tub floor wasn't high enough to keep the water out in super heavy rain. So the backsplash into the tent caused the seam on top of the tub floor to soak through. It soaked the pockets connected to the seam, and the water dripped right into the tent. So based on my heavy rain tests, here's how I rated each tent for rain protection. The next test is ventilation, and we're going to look at first the amount of mesh on each tent, second the number of rainfly vents, and third condensation. Let's start with the first point. How much mesh does each tent have? Of course, here's a neat little table showing you exactly what to look out for. The tents with the most mesh are the Teton and Kelty, coming in at 80% mesh, and these are like pure 3-season summer tents. The tents with the least mesh are the Alps Mountaineering Links and the REI Trail Hut. These are more like 3+ season tents to be used in the off-season, but not in the winter. Check note that none of these tents here are winter tents. When I say 80% mesh, I mean apart from the tub floor at the bottom, the rest of these tents are just like pure mesh. Typically, the more mesh there is on a tent, the better the ventilation. And here are the tents with the least mesh. Notice there's quite a lot more fabric on the tent body, less mesh, so this usually means less ventilation, but it also helps to keep the heat in the off-season. On top of just mesh, we've also got to look at the number of vents on the rainfly. Typically, the more of these openings on the rainfly, these are called vents, the better the ventilation, and here's a quick table of info for you to check out. In the first column, we've got the number of vents in each tent. But not all of them are super useful because some of them leak when it's raining, so here's the actual number that can be left open in the rain. On top of that, I also checked out whether each of these tents can be guyed out at the width. For most 2-person tents on top of the vestibules at the lengths of the tent, also check that the widths have an extra guy out point there, so you can either tie a guy line there or just use a stake. When you do so, this pulls the rainfly away from the tent body, creating a sort of like bottom vent for more ventilation. When we actually add up the number of rainfly vents plus whether the tents can be guyed out at widths, we get the actual total number of vents from the most to the least. And of course, I also tested each tent out for condensation by sleeping in all these tents overnight, but none of these tents had any condensation issues. Just a full disclaimer though, I'm not very big and I slept in all these tents alone, so the results may not be the most accurate. But hopefully it was still helpful, and based on each of these 3 ventilation sub-tests, here's how I rated each backpacking tent for overall ventilation. For quality, I'm going to focus on all the different materials each tent is made of, starting with the flooring, tent body, and rainfly. And as usual, everything is arranged starting from the best. The materials in the Teton are super thick, double the thickness of all the other tents, as you can see from the 150D denier rating. Typically, the higher the number here, the thicker and more durable the fabric is. On top of that, the rainfly is made of ripstop, which is much more tear resistant than regular tent materials. Next up, we have polyester taffeta, which tends to be more tightly woven and stronger than just regular polyester. And that's basically how to quickly judge the quality of the materials each tent is made of. And since all these tents are budget-friendly tents, none of them are made of nylon, which tend to be more lightweight but also more expensive. Next up, we've also got to look at the materials of the poles, zippers, and mesh, plus the length of the warranty provided for each tent. Only North Face's poles were made of DAC, which is a top-of-the-line tent pole brand, while the rest are just regular aluminum poles. But only some brands stated that theirs were specifically 7000 series, the rest did not, but I suspect that it should be the same as well. And only the North Face's zippers are SBS branded, the rest had no brand. And only REI's warranty is quite short, the rest are pretty good to excellent. Based on everything we talked about in this quality test, here's how I rated each budget backpacking tent for quality. The next test is portability, and I looked at not only the weight of each tent, but also the smallest pack size, starting with the weight of each tent. Here's the package weight, so that's everything thrown in, like the tent body, rainfly poles, stakes, guy lines, repair sleeve, and the carry bag. If you leave the carry bags, the sleeve, and the stakes behind, you get the trail weight, which typically ranges from like 7 to 10 ounces less than the package weight. And since these are two-person tents, the weight per person comes in at between 2 to 3 pounds, which is not great compared to ultralight tents, but not terrible considering the prices you're paying for these budget tents. And if you like extra versatility with a footprint-only setup, these are the tents that come with a free footprint and the weight of that footprint as well. Take note that even though the REI Trail Hut comes with a footprint, it doesn't have a footprint-only setup because it doesn't come with grommets like other footprints. Instead, the footprint comes pre-attached to the tent body via these toggles here, not grommets. You need the grommets to secure the tent poles for the footprint-only setup, and this tent doesn't have that. Now, as for the pack size of each tent, here's the size of each tent when packed back into the carry bag, but honestly, this isn't the best comparison because it depends solely on the size of the carry bag. So just based on the weight of each tent, not the pack size, here's how all the budget backpacking tents compared in terms of portability. And finally, here are the overall results. I spent almost $1,400 buying all 8 of these tents and about 2 months testing them all, so if this video has been helpful, please help me hit that like button. As usual, I color-coded the ratings. Green is pretty good, yellow is not so good, and red's pretty bad. With that, here's the overall score for each of these backpacking tents. But before you buy any of these, I'll talk you through my recommendations first, and here's everything that I'm going to go through to help you pick the best one for yourself. First up, my favorite pick is the North Face Stormbreak 2. It has one of the highest scores of all the tents here, plus it did fantastic in so many tests. First, it's super spacious thanks to the not 2, not 3, but 4 pole structure of this tent, giving you tons of livable space inside the tent. Second, it has one of the best doors and also has the most pockets of any of the tents in this review. Third, it's fantastic in the rain, and in general, my North Face tents have easily gone 24 hours of heavy rain without leaking at all. And of course, the quality is great as well, complete even with DAC aluminum poles that can withstand super strong winds, the only tent in this review that has that. Now, how does the North Face compare to other similarly priced tents? Here's a graph showing you exactly what to take note of. On this axis, we have our overall scores that I just showed you, and on this axis, we have the MSRP of each tent. Now, this graph currently only shows the tents in the $200 range, so that's only the North Face, REI, Marmot, and Coleman. The rest will be filled in just a bit. If we add a trend line to the graph, what do you notice? A couple of the tents are average performing, one of them underperformed, and one of them outperformed the rest. And what else do you notice? Somehow the North Face got the highest score, even though it's the cheapest tent of the rest here. So if your budget is about $200 and you want the best bang for your buck, you know what to do. Now, what if your budget is a little bit less in the $100 range instead? Don't worry, I've got you covered with 3 other tents, and we're gonna add the Teton Mountain Ultra, the Alps Mountaineering Lynx, and the Kelty Late Start. Now, if you look at the exact same trend line again, it'll show you exactly which ones underperform and which one outperformed the rest. And surprisingly, again, somehow the cheapest tent here scored the best, exactly the same as our $200 pick. So if your budget is about $100-ish, I think it's pretty clear which one is the best for you. Now you may be wondering, should you go for the North Face or the Teton? They're both pretty great, right? Personally, if you have that extra bit of budget, I'd go with the North Face. Here's why it edges out the Teton a little bit. The North Face has a 4-pole structure, giving you more livable space inside the tent, while the Teton has only 3 poles, so less livable space. The North Face also has 3 square feet more space because the vestibules are huge. There are these like trapezium-shaped vestibules, while Teton has the usual smaller triangle vestibules. Take note that the biggest con the North Face has is that the vestibule zippers are not one-handed. If you try to use one hand, it'll keep snagging and snagging. But this becomes less of a big deal if you don't mind having to use your other hand to guide the zipper along. I've also tried and tested the North Face waterproofing for 24 hours straight, and it held up like a champ. I haven't had yet the same opportunity with the Teton for now. The DAC poles that the North Face comes with is also a huge selling point, top of the line poles, and overall it packs down very slightly lighter than the Teton. But there's still one more tent we haven't yet included in this graph, and this is it right here, the Nemo Aurora 2. I also really like this tent, but honestly at an MSRP of $300, it's a little bit on the steep side for a budget-friendly tent. But I think it's still worth mentioning that if your main priority is a very spacious 2-person tent, the Nemo is probably your best bet. If you thought the North Face was spacious, the Nemo is actually even bigger. So the North Face has this square at the top of the tent where you get a very nice extended peak height, but only throughout this entire square. The rest of the tent slopes downwards. As for the Nemo though, the pole structure is even more unique. It has this hub pole, which creates almost vertical walls here on the left and the right. Next, it also has a ridge pole at the top, which creates another 2 vertical walls. Notice that the area where you get the extended peak height is much wider than the square on top of the North Face. That's why it's so big. And yes, when I measured the height at the literal 4 edges of the tent, so the right, left, back, and front, you do indeed get the extended peak height throughout the entire tent. There's another tent that I wanted to mention, the REI Trail Hut 2, because I think the MSRP is a little bit overstated here. REI quite frequently discounts their Trail Hut by at least 30%, so that'll increase your bang for your buck with this tent. And it also comes with a free footprint, which usually costs us about $20 to $30, while Teton doesn't come with a footprint. So when you take that into account, the amount you're paying for the Trail Hut now falls solidly into the $100 range, down to almost the same price as the Teton. That is also fantastic value for money. As for the rest of the other 4 tents, they're not bad tents by any means. They're actually perfectly functional tents. But since there are other better options on the market that I just talked you through, I guess I wouldn't strongly recommend any of these at the moment. If you want to look at more $100 tent options and even $200 tent options, pick the video on the screen that's more within your budget, and I'll see you in that one.